Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Good, bad, crazy martinis for you today. Jim, let's start with the good, and this should have been a non-story, really, given the fact that Biden and Trump had agreed to this second debate. Their first one was back in June, and of course, led to eventually Joe Biden dropping out of the race, the Democrats rallying around Kamala. But this September 10th debate on ABC had been part of that deal. Trump initially said after the switch that, well, it's a whole different situation now. I'm going to reconsider this. I also want to do Fox News. I also want to do NBC. Kamala says, I'm not doing Fox News. You agreed to this debate. We're going to do it. Then Kamala decided that she wanted to challenge the rules that had been previously agreed to. She wanted unmuted mics. Trump was pushing for muted mics because that worked really, really well for him in the debate with Joe Biden. So, Jim, we're finally going to get the debate, ABC. So I think we're going to get, Jonathan Karl, who we talked about in the context of Tom Cotton a few days ago. So hopefully he's dealing a little more straight. I don't know if Stephanopoulos is part of this or not. But in terms of...
Stephanopoulos is not a moderator, as far as I know. So at least we don't have that going for us. Yeah.
That's good. But as to why Kamala Harris might have wanted the unmuted mics, most people think it was to recreate moments like this from the vice presidential debate 4 years ago.
Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
So I think she just wanted that moment or maybe something similar to it, Jim. But ultimately, we're back where we started months ago, a different candidate on the Democratic side, but we are going to get a debate.
I was going to say, Greg, what's absolutely fascinating is the degree to which the Kamala Harris campaign is so invested in this concept of recreating that I'm speaking moment. They're really convinced that this is what sways the debate, this perception that the person she's debating is speaking over her or being rude or disregarding her because she's a woman, because she's African American, because she's Indian American, all that kind of stuff. There's all this context that goes to it. And you'd like to think that, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. That shouldn't be your big, no pun intended, trump card. That shouldn't be your zinger, gotcha, this is going to win the debate for us type moment. And to the point where she was tweeting that Trump is knuckling under to his advisors who won't allow him to speak. Like she's demanding, please put me in the circumstances where I am most likely to be interrupted so that I can have this moment of grand indignation. And so first of all, it's unlikely to happen now. It'd be kind of funny if a moderator interrupts her and she decides to play the card then. The best case scenario, I think, would be in the first answer, if Trump says something and the moderator attempts to follow up or interrupt or something, for Trump to say, excuse me, I'm speaking now. And to get it in there first. So if she does it later, she looks kind of like she's copying him. This is a really dumb, weird thing to get all wrapped up about. It is also strange that it is September 5th. There is one more debate, September 10th. And maybe there'll be another, but there's no guarantee. And there's supposed to be one vice presidential debate between, I nearly said Pence, between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. First of all, this means we have really nothing going on for most of the months of September and October other than competing rallies and things like that. We know Harris is going to do a lot more television interviews or newspaper interviews or web or anything else like that. This is the debate like this. When you decide to only do one of them, this does increase the pressure on those debates. As we discussed earlier in the week, really all the swing states look pretty darn close, or certainly a jump ball. Maybe one candidate's up by a couple, 1 or 2, 3 points than the other. Certainly nobody's put any of these swing states away. By the way, Greg, boy, if you're the Harris campaign, wouldn't you love to have Pennsylvania locked up by now with, say, Josh Shapiro being your running mate or something? But oh well, guess we couldn't do that. Guess we had to placate the Hamas protesters. So the stakes are high for this debate, and this might be the only time we see Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on the same stage. And I believe this is the only time they've never met. They've never met in person. They've never crossed paths. He never had her at the White House. She never met him when he was up on Capitol Hill. Nothing like that. It's a really strange set of circumstances for this.
That is odd, since she was in the Senate for his entire presidency, but apparently, other than seeing each other from a distance at the State of the Union or something, didn't actually formally meet. I'm sure they're both very, very troubled by that. So, yeah, unless Harris face plants, I think this will be the final debate. If she doesn't do well, she'll probably figure out a way to want one more.
Before we move on, just want to observe, I remember in the Dick Cheney-John Edwards debate,
Yes.
where Cheney said to Edwards, a whole bunch of things happened. Edwards, making a really ugly shot at Cheney's daughter for being homosexual and things like that. But at one point, Cheney says, you've been a senator for 6 years. This is the first time I've ever met you. And it was kind of this, I think a subtly effective, this guy's a show horse, not a workhorse. He sounds and looks like he's really important, but he doesn't actually get stuff done. I don't know if Trump will make the same kind of move against Harris, but I do kind of feel like you just figure elected officials at a certain level, they at some point meet each other, they interact with each other, and apparently Harris and Trump have never really been in the same room.
We'll see how it goes a week from yesterday, next Tuesday night, September 10th. We'll obviously have full reaction the next day. In the meantime, if you were on the debate negotiating team and you thought you had this all settled a number of weeks ago and all of a sudden you're hashing it out at the last second here, I can understand if you want to have a celebratory drink tonight, but take Z-Biotics first, because I'll promise you, you'll feel much better tomorrow than you would have otherwise if you hadn't taken it.
Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. When you drink, the alcohol you drink gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next morning. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. So just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, as always, and you will feel your best the following morning.
As I've mentioned many times, I've got a colleague who knew his limits. Then as he aged, felt worse the next morning. Now he's taking Z-Biotics, feels great. Go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And I know this will shock a lot of people, but a lot of countries want to influence our elections in various ways. So we just talked yesterday about how China infiltrated the New York governor's office. Yesterday, the Attorney General Merrick Garland, with the FBI Director Chris Wray at his side, was talking about this as well, about countries, including Iran, who are very active in this. But the indictments that Merrick Garland announced yesterday specifically deal with Russia and influence that they're trying to do online through what's left of Russia Today, now known as RT. So a couple different clips here from Garland. Here's, first of all, his announcement of the indictment.
This morning, we unsealed an indictment in the Southern District of New York of Konstantin Kalashnikov and Elena Afanasieva, two Russian-based employees of RT, a Russian state-controlled media outlet. They are charged with conspiring to commit money laundering and to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act.
And somewhere yesterday, Jim was glumly crossing off the name Konstantin Kalashnikov from his next Dangerous Click novel, because that is almost too on the nose for a Russian.
It's a little on the nose. Yeah, if I call a bad guy Kalashnikov, I wrote a script for my friends in which a bad guy was named Boris Badikov, not Badanov from Rocky and Bullwinkle. Badikov, another Russian, but even that, Boris Bad. Pretty on the, pretty clear what they're supposed to be. I can't remember who it was on Twitter, so my apologies if I'm stealing a joke, but somebody said, God, who could have figured that somebody named Kalashnikov didn't have America's best interest at heart?
So anyway, he says that after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, RT pulled out of the U.S., got taken off the air in the EU, Canada, and other places, the UK, I think. And now he's talking about what he believes RT is currently up to.
But as RT itself has boasted, the government of Russia continued to use RT to direct disinformation and propaganda. In the wake of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, RT's editor-in-chief said the company had built, quote, an entire empire of covert projects designed to shape public opinion in Western audiences.
And so part of this is funneling a lot of money through a shell corporation, so making it harder to trace, into different media entities, one of which reporters have tracked down as Tennessee-based Tenet Media, which employs a number of prominent commentators, some of whom have well over 1 million or even 2 million followers on YouTube. I recognize a number of the names here, half of them actually: Rubin, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool. And the indictment actually says the commentators themselves were not aware of this. And I think at least Rubin and Johnson have put out statements saying nobody ever told me, and I think Poole said as well, what to do. It's all been my content. Nobody's ever tried to influence that. So anyway, they, to some extent, certainly feel betrayed here. There is some evidence that at least one of the commentators didn't feel like this was on the up and up and wanted to learn more about it. A lot of folks on the right saying, well, the momentum for Harris seems to have ebbed, so the DOJ is back to their Russia collusion narrative here. So, Jim, what do you make of what we know for sure?
Well, first of all, if you're in the conservative media world, even if you don't follow Benny Johnson, you've never heard of him, chances are you've written some of his material. For those who don't get it, a lot of people have seen their stuff pop up in Benny Johnson's social media feeds. Just somehow it got there. No attribution of who did it, but hey, that's, I want to be clear, because when this came out, the immediate reaction of a lot of people in conservative media world was, here we go again, Russia, Russia, Russia. It's Russiagate all over again. This is not an assault on the First Amendment by American citizens. None of the Americans involved, none of the commentators involved were charged with any illegal wrongdoing. The two but these are Russian citizens over in Russia. Chances are they're never going to see the inside of an American jail cell, but they are the ones charged with the crime. You can sing the praises of Vladimir Putin as much as you possibly like. What you cannot do is act on behalf of the Russian government without registering as a foreign agent, which is what these two RT agents did. And you cannot, launder the funds to hide the source. And that is the crimes at work here. Nobody's facing any criminal charges for anything they said to praise Russia or criticize aid to Ukraine or criticize the U.S. government or anything like that. Now, with that said, and again, it's really not fair to say of these commentators, and we got all 6 of them because I don't want one of them to get forgotten about or anything like that. Lauren Southern, Tim Pool, Taylor Hansen, Matt Christensen, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson. Greg, no one should say that they are Russian spies. No one should say that they are knowing Russian agents or that they knowingly and willingly touted the Putin line. These people are completely innocent, useful idiots. They are gullible. They are easily fooled. You can take them to the cleaners, but they did not do any of this stuff deliberately. So let's be clear on that. Now, when I say, if it seems like I'm being a little facetious in my defense of these people, you should understand that so somebody comes along and has offered commentator 1. We don't know exactly which figure which commentator. There's certain clues in the indictment referring to how many followers they have on YouTube. But I just one of those 6 was offered essentially $400,000 a month to make one video a week. Now, Radio America seems to be doing okay. National Review is doing okay, but neither one of us are in the neighborhood where we're making $400,000 a month. You do the math on that, that comes out to $4.8 million per year. For perspective, Brock Purdy, the current starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, is expected to make $1 million this year. And he has linebackers who are trying to kill him. All right, so you look at that. Commentator 1 was making roughly 5 times what the quarterback who started in the Super Bowl made. Just for perspective on that. They did ask for information about the benefactor who was financing all of this. They made up here's the thing. You Google the name they gave, nothing comes up. But apparently this was a Belgian financier, somebody who had worked in financial markets for a long time, and who just decided he wanted to start a media company, hiring these 6 people out in Tennessee. Now, that doesn't happen that much in the American media landscape. You just don't find Europeans who are like, hey, would you like nearly $5 million a year to make one video a week? Those deals are really hard to find. When you are that wealthy, that powerful, that influential, but your name doesn't show up in a Google search. Now, to a lot of people, that would smell funny. That would seem a little bit weird. And to his credit, whichever he is, Commentator 1 did look at the bio that was sent to him about this person financing the whole thing, and he found something that looked suspicious. Apparently, this Constantine, Belgian financier, he said he stood for social justice. And that made him put him on alert. Not the fact that nothing else checked out. Not the fact that, the employment history, name doesn't... He has no online presence. There's nothing on LinkedIn. There's no mention of him ever in any company press release or anything like that. He runs an equity firm, but there's no advertising for it. There's no website for it. None of that seemed weird. But yeah, he said he was for social justice. So, and you go back and look at the things that Tim Pool was saying. Now, he says he was not a witting or willing agent of the Russian state. By his own volition, he went out and said, quote, Ukraine is the enemy, and he pounds the desk, of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine. They're expanding this war. You've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them what to do. Ukraine is now accused by German war, I think I'm in a German warrant, blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, which kind of was true. It wasn't the Ukrainian government, it was a private group. Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia, and they know it. Now, Greg, the pro-Putin messaging there is subtle. A lot of listeners might have missed it. It might have kind of gone over that. You really have to listen carefully to get a sense that this is what the message that the Russian government wanted to put out there. Now, Tim Pool said that he was totally taken to the cleaners, that he had no idea about any of this stuff, that no one told him what to say. Benny Johnson put out a statement on X, and he says, we are disturbed by the allegations in today's indictment, which made clear that myself and other influencers were victims in this alleged scheme. They were victims. Somebody was making $400,000 a month, but nonetheless, they're victims. Remember, they're the true victims here. My lawyers will handle anyone who states or suggests otherwise. Well, you should be disturbed, right? Because, look, even first of all, even if you didn't know, and you really did believe, in magic beans and fairies and genies and Belgian financiers who want to pay you six-figure sums to write all this kind of stuff, I'd love to know, at any point did this not seem to make sense? At any point did this seem too good to be true? And because this has been going on for the better part of a year. At any point did this seem... Okay, I'm just checking. So anyway, this is, again, for those who forget, the Russian military fired a missile into a children's hospital about a month ago. Right. This is who these people are. This is who the Russian government is. Now, if you want to argue U.S. aid to Ukraine is a waste, fine, okay, we can have those discussions. If you want to say Putin is misunderstood, I think everybody understands him all too well. But when you're making... I closed with a quote from Reagan, which ironically was used in the movie that we discussed yesterday. He did not believe that the Communist Party should be banned. And he actually argued the U.S. democracy was fine. But he does make this point. When you say, I'm an American, I believe Putin is terrific, that's fine. When you start getting paid by the Russian government to say Putin is fine, well, now we're outside of the usual realm of First Amendment protected speech. And even if you shouldn't be arrested for it, even if you shouldn't face criminal charges for it, you're not just expressing an opinion. You're an agent of a hostile regime dispersing their propaganda. And even if there's not a legal consequence, I think there should be a severe reputational consequence to everybody involved in something as egregious as this.
Comes on the same day that Putin officially endorses Kamala Harris, saying her laugh is contagious, Jim. That's one word for it. Yeah. And predictable, I think, was another word he used. He also used that for Biden back in...
So is the Joker's laugh when he uses the gas.
And just to reiterate what Jim was saying before, Radio America and National Review are not involved in anything like this in any conceivable way. Our opinions, as much as you may or may not like them, are our own. We are not being paid for that. However, I would add, Jim, that we would be willing to talk about Die Hard once a week for, let's say, I don't know, $640 million in negotiable bearer bonds.
Or we can start at that. So 20th Century Fox, give us a call. Any streaming service, anything like that? There's no amount of Russian money that could make me talk up Die Hard 5. I have my principles. There are only four Die Hard movies. Only two.
That's probably the one they'd be least likely to promote also, but given the weak storyline that there was there. But
ironically, after it was released, they put all the reels in Chernobyl, kind of the reverse of trying to get stuff out of Chernobyl.
Exactly. All All right, Jim, let's get to our crazy martini now. We started today with Kamala Harris, and we're going to finish with Kamala Harris today. This is the Free Beacon. Thomas Catenacci, I think is how you say the last name. Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign recently walked back Harris's position on EV mandates, stating she, quote, does not support an electric vehicle mandate, unquote. But the campaign is now shying away from questions about whether Harris would sign or veto legislation she personally co-sponsored in the Senate that would implement a nationwide EV mandate. The campaign on Wednesday ignored several questions from the Washington Free Beacon, asking for it to clarify Harris's position on EV mandates. That came one day after a Harris campaign official declined to comment late Tuesday to Axios on whether she would even sign the so-called Zero Emission Vehicles Act that she helped to craft in 2019. So when you look at the Axios story, Harris's campaign has sent contradictory signals about her position on a mandate for automakers, a key issue in pivotal Midwestern states such as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where many auto workers are based. In a lengthy fact-check email last week that covered several issues, a campaign spokesperson included a line saying that Harris, quote, does not support an electric vehicle mandate, unquote, suggesting she changed her previous position without elaborating. On August 28th, Axios asked the Harris campaign to clarify her position and whether she would sign or veto the bill that she had co-sponsored back in 2019. On Tuesday afternoon, Harris's campaign ultimately declined to comment. So, Jim, I guess her position on this and so many other issues is basically that thing that more talented people than me put in their post on Twitter, where it's just kind of the shrug with a bunch of different punctuation marks. And so I guess it's kind of like Nancy Pelosi and Obamacare. You'll find out what she believes when she's elected, if she's elected.
Well, Greg, we know that traditionally the Democratic Party loves candidates who are best known by their initials. FDR, JFK, LBJ. LBJ, by the way, was Bill Clinton's nickname in Spanish class. And with Kamala Harris, you'll hear KH. She's really going to be known as TBD, as in her positions are to be determined later, probably after the election. This is, by the way, so it's been an interesting argument about whether, if there had been a Democratic primary this year, if Biden had said, I'm not running for another term, would Harris be the nominee? And you probably would have bigger names than Dean Phillips and, for a little while, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson running against her. Vice presidency is a pretty significant advantage. And I think we in the right who don't want to see her win should not have any illusions. Like, one of the reasons she crashed and burned in 2019 was because Democrats had lots of other options. They don't have any other options right now. So they are going to stick with her come hell or high water, no matter what happens between now and Election Day. But in this case, her positions probably were miscalculated. Her performances in the debates probably were not what she needed to have there. And if she had gone through that process, she probably would have had to court the left more, and she would have had to lay out more specific promises, like electric car mandates. But maybe she would have said she was going to ban fracking. I mean, when the question of fracking came up, she said that all of her positions from 2019 are no longer operative, that once she became Biden's running mate, almost like Biden positions were surgically transferred into her, overriding and replacing her old positions, and therefore those are her positions. But also, she's her own woman. She's not just a automaton who does whatever the Biden administration wants to do. She's going to set her own agenda, and there are differences. You're just not allowed to know what those differences are, apparently. And this is the current thing. This is why, by the way, the media, not just National Review, not just conservative media, but the mainstream media should be spitting hot nails about the fact that she's only done one interview. It's a little less than an hour. We talked about it last week, kind of underwhelmed. But traditionally, candidates do a lot of these. Traditionally, candidates do press conferences. Traditionally, candidates do sit-downs with editorial boards. Traditionally, candidates sit down and get interviewed for these long profiles. Harris hasn't done any of that. And that's one of the reasons why in fact, it is September 5th, Greg. Is there a issues part on her website?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nope. My shrugs are not as effective on an audio podcast, I recognize. But the look of exasperation on my face, you're not supposed to be able to do this and get elected president. You're supposed to fill in the blanks. You're supposed to have a good sense of the policy agenda. And the staff saying, we're just not going to say what her position is on that issue. No. Every once in a while, Hillary Clinton used to get in trouble for saying, they'd ask her something. She's like, well, I'm not going to answer that because that's a hypothetical. Hey, you know what else is a hypothetical? A Hillary Clinton presidency, a Kamala Harris presidency. A second term of Donald Trump is a hypothetical. If you want to be president, you have to answer hypotheticals because you're asking the voters to entertain the notion of a hypothetical. And that's, somehow Kamala Harris has managed to get out of it, and here we are. So good luck asking questions during that debate. That may be the last time Kamala Harris takes questions between now and Election Day.
Could be. And I think the reason so many people are fine with it, from her base to other Democrats on Capitol Hill to many in the media, is that they know from her time in the Senate what her positions are. They know what they're getting. And the goal right now is to win over enough independents to get the swing states you need to get to 270 in the Electoral College. And so why upset the apple cart when you've got some moderates leaning your way at the moment, potentially?
Yeah, Democrats have always operated by the Al Davis mantra, just win, baby. And also break the rules whenever you can because you have a reputation for it and the refs will cover for you. And there's no such thing as a tuck rule. Those are the three philosophies that the Democrats have adopted. And they get away with it in a way that Republicans simply don't. And it's outrageous and it's infuriating. But if you're a Republican campaign, you kind of have to be ready for that. And you're also, there are ways to pressure. If Kamala Harris wins, it would not shock me if she had a short honeymoon and that she encountered some tough coverage fairly early on, because I think there is indeed some pent up frustration on the part of the media that they get so little access to her, and that they don't get to ask any questions. They don't get to write anything new. She's basically giving the same old stump speech. As I point out, she never mentions Russia and Ukraine. Up until her convention speech, she did not mention China. There's some big issues that are just completely ignored by her. That I know we think a lot of reporters are very biased and left wing, but they also like having something to write about. And when you don't feed if you don't feed the beast starts to eat you. So they're gonna hold that back. You're not gonna see a lot of tough coverage between now and Election Day. But I suspect that on January 20th, they get 1 or 2 days of happy, and then the tough questions will start coming in because they've been sitting on questions for the better part of 6 months now.
They could get tough about it now if they had some integrity on the job, but instead they gotta they'd have to put down the pom-poms if they wanted to pick up the pen. So that's a problem. The other thing that strikes me from the 2019 campaign, the more I think about it, Jim, is how far to the left she ran, which may have been the more authentic her. I think it is. But when you consider that Bernie Sanders dominated that lane, you would think if you were going to, pull the charade of I'm more moderate than I've led you to believe until just now when I need you to not think of me as a radical lefty, you'd think she would have wedged a spot between Bernie and Biden at that point. But instead, she was up there with Bernie saying, oh, yeah, no more private health insurance. Yeah, illegal immigration. That's not a real criminal offense, and all this other stuff that pushed her way out on the fringe where Bernie already had that vote locked up. And then the fact that she couldn't spit out a coherent paragraph pretty much doomed her long before she ever got to the first contest.
Is it Election Day yet, Greg?
No, but 2 months from today is. Only 61 days to go. Can we make it? I think we can. Jim, have a great Thursday. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Thursday. Please join us on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.